Hello. Welcome to the People, Planet, Profit podcast. My name is Hayley Jarick. I'm the CEO of the Supply Chain Sustainability School. And today I am joined by GECA, or the Good Environmental Choice Australia's CEO, Michelle Thomas. Michelle is passionate about creating solutions and offering pathways for businesses to choose a more sustainable future for the people and planet. She has a wealth of business experience in fundraising and marketing, and she now uses to drive positive change to address environmental and sustainability challenges in businesses and across supply chains. Michelle believes working together is crucial when implementing circular economy solutions. She is keen to collaborate with like-minded individuals and organisations to find solutions, working collectively to drive those solutions forward and help solve the problems we are facing today. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks, Hayley. Thanks for having me. So I think today my theme for the top 5 tips is really aimed at taking a holistic approach to sustainability and supporting those small businesses when designing those products and sort of when manufacturing and when purchasing products themselves. So to understand how to apply a holistic view to product design, it's really about making sure that you understand your supply chains and looking at it, I think, from a real life cycle approach. It's really important that you understand each product and material and manufacturing process has that sort of different environmental, health and social impact to it. So in brief, my top 5 points, and I'll go through them in more detail as we go on, is number 1, environmental impact. So, looking at that circular economy, which is such a buzzword right now, resource efficiency, biodiversity, carbon reduction and climate change. Number 2, it's those real sort of health impacts. Number 3, the human and labour rights. Number 4, fit for purpose. And number 5, it's avoiding greenwashing and the role of standards and eco-labels. There was a really nice quote that I picked out from an Ellen MacArthur article on recycling and circular economy. And it's that we really need to ensure that products and materials are designed from the outset to be reused, repaired and remanufactured. It's the consequences of decisions made at the design stage that determine around 80% of environmental impacts. So that really sort of brings to the forefront the importance of designing with the end in mind. So point 1, as I said, it's really about considering your environmental impacts. It's about embracing that circular outlook. As I said, we were all really familiar now with that diagram that we see of a circular economy. It's about resource efficiency. It's really driving those circular economies and moving away from that linear sort of model that we've been following for so long now. And that really refers to several strategies. It's sort of, avoid, big one, avoid, reduce, reuse and recycle resources. All of those strategies sort of help promote resource conservation and really address those negative impacts of raw materials. So there's really lots of opportunities to employ those strategies throughout the life cycle of a product, from packaging to design to manufacture, right through to the end of life usage. And it really needs to be considered, as I said earlier, at that sort of design phase. When you're creating something or manufacturing something, you need to know how to take it apart very much at the end. And all the points that I'm kind of going through today are very much interconnected. Everything sort of relates to one another, and it's how you sort of, as small businesses and as consumers and big businesses, take on these sort of areas to improve. So what are some examples and how do we navigate some sustainable design? Looking at dematerialization, using rapidly renewable resources, using material components that have that recycled content in it. Make sure that you can recycle the product at the end. It's again designed for disassembly. Product manufacturing that allows post-consumer recycling is really good, and those product stewardship schemes are also really important. It's always having the end in mind, that whole sort of circular economy. How are we picking it correctly, using it correctly, and just keeping it in that loop at all times. And again, just to harp on about circular economy, there is such a buzz about it now. We really, really need to capitalise on the buzz that everybody's talking about. Biodiversity and environmental impacts as well. As you know, biodiversity refers to the variety of living species in the ecosystems. We need to make sure that we have healthy ecosystems to provide those raw materials that create the products that small businesses are making. And without sustainable sourcing practices, destruction and degradation of habitats can lead to real sort of irreversible damage. So how do we do that? How do businesses do that? When designing materials, they need to look for where those raw materials are coming from, sustainably sourced raw materials using labels such as PEFC, FSC that are really promoting proper sourcing of those materials, or fair ethical sourcing of materials, of those raw materials. And again, sort of going back to making sure that we're keeping the loop going, and you've got a lot of carbon offsets. Can we plant more trees? What can we do to make sure that we're keeping our biodiversity healthy? Also within environmental is carbon reduction and climate change. Again, a really sort of high topic right now. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, because I think we all know the concerns, the issues that we're facing right now. I think the most recent IPCC report that came out, I think last week, it was a bit doom and gloom. And I think the real message that came through in the IPCC report is it's now or never. We really need to make these changes. We can't have targets that are really far away. We need to be doing stuff right now. And 45% of greenhouse gas emission comes from producing the cars, producing those building materials, producing the food, producing all the products. It's the production that takes up a lot of the carbon emissions. So building and construction, we know that building and construction is also sort of a significant area for carbon emissions. I think 39% of all carbon emissions in the world come from the manufacturing, transportation, construction. And we really need to be looking at how we can reduce it. How can we minimize our carbon? How do we work towards that? We need to consider the total greenhouse gases that are produced in manufacturing and distribution, looking at embodied carbon. So for a product, looking how much carbon emissions each product is emitting. How do we make sure that we're focusing on the impacts of every area? Can we look for getting climate active? Look for companies and businesses and suppliers that have done life cycle assessments. An LCA or an EPD shows quite clearly through clear methodology what your carbon emission impacts are for a product or a service. So it's purchasing or using suppliers that have that in mind. It's being aware and looking for or asking for certification, climate active certifications on certain products or services that you might use. Second tip, sorry, that's a very long tip. The second tip, that was just one. The second tip is very much about your health impacts, hazardous substances and their emissions. So certain products, most products will have chemical compounds, chemical inputs, and those chemical inputs, we all know about carcinogens, we all know about various sort of chemicals that are harmful to human health, but there's sort of toxic heavy metals and heavy compounds such as mercury, arsenic, that are also really detrimental to the health, not just to the health of the end user, but to the health of the manufacturing staff. So it's ensuring that we're aware of the chemical inputs. There's also VOC, so off-gassing, volatile organic compounds, which are emissions coming out of products and it's not services coming out of products, but people think that it's like paints or adhesives, but they come out of your carpets, of your furniture. So it's how do we ensure that we're really aware of what is going into our products, what's coming out of our products, and what those health impacts are on humans. You know, there's lots of respiratory sort of issues that come about nowadays. Where are they coming from? You know, are there more chemicals going into the products that we're using today? So how do we sort of avoid that? What are your areas to sort of focus on? I think all organisations should be aware of the hazardous chemicals that are going into their products when designing their products. And it's not just what's going into the product, it's what's being used in that manufacturing process as well. You know, understand the chemicals that are going in. You know, try and avoid VOCs completely, you know, with the GECA standards, and not harping on about GECA standards, but GECA standards always ensure that there are no hazardous chemicals or limited hazardous chemicals used within a product, banned from being used, and that VOCs are limited or at a certain amount, allowed at a certain amount. So when designing products, be aware of that and look for those sort of areas that you can lower. You know, there are a lot of lists. You've got REACH, which will show sort of that those real hazardous chemicals. You've got Declare's red list. So look around, be aware, know what's going into your products. Tip 3, consider your human and labour rights. Who's going to make your product? We're really sort of keen to say at GECA, sustainability, you can't look at sustainability without looking at the people. There is no such thing as being truly sustainable if you haven't looked at the people involved in that process. You can't ignore the treatment of people, and you've got to understand who is making your product, who is involved, not just within your organisation, but those tier 2s, tier 3s. You know, it's really key to understand your suppliers. It's really important to know who's doing the work for you, who's supporting you. And I think the term supplier is very much a one-way term, you know, just the word supplier. It makes you think that, you know, it's someone doing the work for you. But when you're looking at human and labour rights, it's understanding that it's a relationship, you know, as an organisation, as a small business, know your suppliers, you know, be in communication. We always say communication is key and collaboration is key. It's really important to understand those processes, that they have sort of fair health, fair work, health policies, fair pay policies, you know, that they're really, that there are policies in place for all of your suppliers. You know, have those conversations with your suppliers, reach out to your suppliers, ask them these open-ended questions, ask them, encourage that collaboration with them, set up face-to-face meetings with them, and invite feedback from your suppliers so that you really are confident that there is that there are processes and practices in place. We have modern slavery here on reporting. It only really captures the top tier of organisations. So small businesses maybe look at modern slavery reporting, and in the GECA standards we do require that all of our licensees undertake modern slavery reporting. But I don't think it's just about the reporting, it's having that commitment to what you're saying you're going to do, ensuring that you do what you say you're going to do. Tip number 4, it's ensuring that product is fit for purpose, and that quality is really implemented into the design. So at the beginning, when we're talking about circular economy and, you know, avoid, we're an overconsumption society right now, you know, and you know, it's awful, because I am too, and I'm sitting in a job as a CEO of an organisation that is about sustainability. And you know, a few months ago my TV broke, and there was lights on my TV, and it was more expensive for me to get my TV fixed than it was for me to purchase a new TV. You know, make sure that product is fit for purpose. Have warranties on your products. Make sure that the product really does what it says on the tin. You know, test it. Make sure that there are fantastic Australian standards to make sure that legislatively, products have a requirement to sort of perform to a certain standard. Go beyond that. Keep your product in the market for as long as you can. Use it for as long as it can be used, you know. Be a designer or design a product that you can keep in that circle for as long as possible, and make sure it really does do what it says on the tin. Final point is not contributing to greenwashing. So you can really seek the help of voluntary standards and eco labels like GECA. You know, GECA is really keen to avoid greenwashing in the marketplace. And, you know, right now we talk about circular economy being a buzzword. You think of how many organizations say this is an eco-friendly product, or, you know, this is a green product, this repels COVID right now, you know, things that are often statements that actually come out of the marketing department. And do they even know that it's eco-friendly? And, you know, by definition of the word product, is anything really eco-friendly? If something has been produced, there is something that has been used to produce that product. You know, there's a manufacturing process, there is raw materials, or even if it's recycled content, it's being produced. So is anything really eco-friendly? So when using terms or when reading those terms as consumers and purchasers, just really make sure that they're accurate. Is that true? Is it really a green product? Does it really repel COVID? So verify your claims. If you're making claims and those claims are accurate and true, verify that those claims are accurate and true. You know, use third-party organisations to verify those claims. The ACL, the Australian Consumer Law, and the ACCC really do crack down on sort of not just misleading claims or incorrect claims, but claims that sometimes are unintentionally misleading. You know, it's sometimes not what you do say, it's sometimes what you don't say as well. So it's really being aware of what you're talking about, and really being aware of those products that you've designed, and those claims that you're making are accurate and are correct. Again, eco-labelling, voluntary standards and certification schemes are available to support that. There are, you've got the ISO, International Organization for Standardization. You've got the ISEAL Alliance, which is International Social and Environmental Accreditation Labelling, Global Eco-Labelling Network, all sort of really reputable organizations. And we at GECA also sort of we make sure that we follow the ISO, specifically the ISO 14024. We follow the ISEAL frameworks, and we're also a member of GEN, but it's using reputable organizations. Again, there is a lot out there with green labeling. How do we cut through that noise? It's making sure that we're using organizations that are trustworthy, transparent, and really sort of sharing the information so that you're confident that it's right. You know, we hope that at GECA, we try at GECA to take out that hard work of making better choices. So we want to support consumers, we want to support businesses. So our eco-labelling looks at that whole life cycle aspect, from that raw material extraction, using recycled content, human and health, you know, making sure it's fit for purpose, looking at that social element, and really sort of that whole entire life cycle right through to the end of life.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that's really important too about that, gaining that third-party certification, is just appreciating that businesses, and I think especially small businesses, you might not have a person that's an expert in everything every time you go to do something. So I think this, you know, acknowledge that there might be things out there you don't know, and by going and seeking a third-party certification, you're going to find out all of those things that you don't know before you start to make claims and get yourself in hot water in that space. And I think that, you know, if anyone listening to this sat down and went, oh, well, I didn't really appreciate, or you're right, you know, like, can anything really be called eco unless it's actually contributing positively back on the environment? You know, am I planting 2 trees for every one I take out? Am I not only offsetting, but then actually doubling the amount of, carbon emissions during my production? Am I actually doing double the offsets back? So I'm actually making a positive carbon contribution to the environment. All of those things that you sort of sit back and go, I thought I was doing good, but there's that, I suppose it's what that Dunning-Kruger effect of, a little bit, you think you know a lot, and then you realize the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And I think sustainability is definitely big in that space, because, like you said, everything is interconnected. And there's so many different things that touch base, whether that's all of the environmental considerations, and there are numerous numbers of them, and you might not be aware of all of them. There are a number of social impacts that you can go through. So it's just being aware. And I think, if you're going to use very generic terms like eco and green or bio or anything like that, that's when you're going to get yourself in a lot of hot water. And you're probably better off being really specific about the claims you are making. Like it could just be that, if you've got you're calling yourself a green product because you've used some recycled content, then just say that. Packaging includes recycled content. Or even use the percentage, up to 25% recycled content in packaging, and just being really clear about that, because I think more and more and more consumers are becoming very cynical of the greenwash, because they are getting burned. If you're saying you're offsetting the emissions, it can't just be from production, it has to be from the entire life cycle of your product. And I think, as in most product life cycle stages, you get your innovation and your early adopters as you go through. And usually those people have really intelligent consumers, and they know what they're getting into, and they will research to the depths of it. And as you start to get into your early majority and late majority of your product life cycle, you will get consumers that aren't going to research it as well as what you thought. So you are going to have to change how you communicate some of those benefits to those to that bigger market, and that's a great problem to have, because it means there's more people buying products that are conscious. And I think from in terms of all of that, I would say that the only extra tip I would add there is sort of, if you purchase things with the same mindset in which you're choosing to sell them, then that's a great source of information for you of how to do that. But it also will make you really aware of all of the amount of things you're purchasing that you might not need to purchase. So step one, avoid. And then also think about all the things that annoy you about what you buy, and then how can you fix those in your products and services. So like you said, it's the TV that you can't repair, it's the washing machine you can't buy the replacement cord for. It's, how do you take returns back for finished products? So, there are some great circular businesses out there that if your product breaks, they'll take it back and they'll break down the components and reuse and recycle them. There is nothing goes to landfill. So I think it's really having that stewardship over all of those, that entire life cycle of what you're putting out there. And as a human species, at the moment, we're operating very much like parasitic to the world that we live in. And we can change that by just making a few small things. And I'm also really mindful that we went through, hopefully you'll go back and listen to this whole podcast again and just go, sorry, what was that again? Because we dropped a lot of, Michelle has been very kind and dropped a lot of, key organizations you should go to, standards you should look up. Please go back and listen to them again and have another look through them. And then we can link to them in the school as we put the podcast up as well. So please come to us if you're looking for more information on, if you heard circular economy and is this really popular? I don't know what that is. Don't worry, we can help you. There's a lot happening in a lot of all these different areas, and small businesses, I think, are very prone to change chat quickly and can get on board with this. It's much easier to change a small cat than spin the Titanic. So, take advantage of it. This can be your niche and how you can make lots of money. And I marvel in all of the innovations of small business, especially in Australia. We're renowned for being really strong innovators. And they haven't let me down yet.
And small businesses, it's easy to make a change as a small business. You haven't got all that sort of that politics, that higher level to cut through. Make that change because you want to make that change. And you're really right. If we can get everybody to make a small change, it makes a big difference. It really does make a big difference.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for Michelle for joining us today. I think we definitely ran through 5 small things or 5 sustainable things that small businesses can do about product design and green eco labeling. And I think that there's definitely those 5 tips you gave are great. And if people listen to this a few times and really go back and hopefully they can then start to think about some of the things that they're producing and doing as a small business and make some changes. So thanks for joining us, Michelle.
Thanks very much for having me, Hayley. Thank you.
And thanks for joining both of us on the People Planet Profit podcast. Until next time, bye.
Bye.